Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we're going to talk about Manjaro, and specifically the new Manjaro Gnome version. Manjaro is loved by some, it is hated by others, but objectively, they do GNOME correctly, and they get a few other things correct as well. We'll talk about those in this video today. Manjaro is based on Arch Linux, but unlike a lot of the other more popular Arch Linuxes like Endeavour OS or Arco Linux or Garuda, which we recently talked about, Manjaro is not a direct descendant of Arch in that it is Arch with a few extra tools or Arch with a new installer. It actually does diverge itself a little bit, kind of like Ubuntu does off of Debian. There's some extra packages, there's some things that are pushed out quickly, and there are some things that are held back. Basically, Manjaro has produced for itself its own distribution based on trying to be more stable than Arch, being as that Arch has classically had a reputation of being unstable. Now, is it truly unstable? I don't know. I have been using Manjaro in production for a while. I'll talk about that near the end of this video. Now, Manjaro has suffered from some instabilities in the past. You can go back, and if you find some old classic stuff way back from like 2016 or so, you will find that Manjaro did bork its installation a few times. It did bork its booting on updates a few times. There are a few issues with it. I'm not saying it is the perfect distribution. However, a lot of those have been resolved. We haven't seen a lot of major issues with Manjaro in the recent years. I guess until I updated my Raspberry Pi more recently. I'll talk about that again at the end. Now, this version, we're going to look at Manjaro GNOME, and on the package of holding things back, this Manjaro GNOME just released only ships with GNOME 44.5, not 45. 45 is new, just released in September. Any Arch build running GNOME is probably also pushing out 45. Manjaro still ships with 44, despite it was released over a month after GNOME 45's release. This does keep with the trend of holding back packages, but that notwithstanding, and the greater improvements to GNOME 45 notwithstanding, Manjaro does GNOME right. It makes me wonder if they did this to prevent some of the extension breaking that we find within GNOME 45. We've talked about that on a separate video as well. So we're going to go ahead and get into this. Stick around to the very end of the video. I'm going to talk about my experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, using Manjaro on a Raspberry Pi in production for, I think, 4 years now. I think is how long I've been doing it. I don't know. I'll go ahead and link the original video of the installation or the original review down below there. You can have a look at that original video, and that'll tell you how long ago it was. But with that, let's go ahead and jump on into the distribution itself. We're going to look at the installer. We're going to have a look at some basic information, the unique features, and then the other Manjaro builds. First, we'll have a look at a few installation considerations. Right here on the initial boot screen, before you even boot into anything, you can choose your time zones, your key tables, your language, and you can choose whether you want to go with open source or proprietary drivers. We also have a manual edit boot options in the case you want to do that. Of course, you might want to choose proprietary drivers if you're doing something like an NVIDIA card or some latest graphics card that may not be available in the Linux kernel. But if you're doing the open source drivers, you're going to be a pretty good one most places. When it comes to the installer, we're going to boot into the Calamares installer. You'll see it's giving me a warning that our system is not plugged into power. That's okay. I don't really mind. We're not actually doing a full install here. We choose our time zones, and then you can choose your specific regions, and you can change your languages, numbers, locales, things like that. Of course, here's your keyboard. And down here, you can choose to replace a partition. You can erase the disk. If you do that, you can go with no swap. You can go with a no hibernate swap, a hibernate swap, or a swap to a file. On the particular install I did, I chose the swap to a file on ext4. We also have the option of a Btrfs, F2FS, and XFS. So you have a few different options that you have as far as your installation proceeds, and then you can choose where your bootloader goes. So that makes this a really nice system. So you go ahead and enter your name over here, and then what is the login name, and then the name of the computer, and choose a super secret password that's definitely not 123. You can automatically log in without, and you can set the same password as the administrative account, or you can set a new password. And then we have the option to go with no software suite. We can go a LibreOffice, or we can go a free office by SoftMaker. Once you've chosen all of those options, we have a summary screen. And at this point in time, you click the install. It's going to run your partitions and install your system. We're not going to do that right here. I just want to walk you through how the installer looks, and then we're going to jump on over to the full installed system so you can see what that looks like. So onto the main Manjaro system here. And again, this is Manjaro Gnome specifically. And we will consider other versions of Manjaro available at the end of the main content portion here. But what we wanted to do here is first we want to have a look at just a few things, simple answers to simple questions. First, let's go up and have a look at the About system. That's going to take care of some of your main questions. So what kernel does this have by default? It is starting with the Linux kernel 655, and this is Manjaro's own specific build. And the windowing system is X11. Now, this is one of the things I really like about this, or maybe not. I don't know. I really like it, but the way it's implemented is a little bit odd. You see, there is inside of one of the best tools in here is the Gnome layout switcher, which we'll cover the full details of this later. But one of the options here is a single toggle button to turn on Wayland. And when you turn on Wayland, now you have Wayland support, but you probably have to reboot your system first. As going back into the system about information, it is still going to tell us that we're running on X. Now, if we go ahead and log out of our main user here, then what we will see here on our login screen is we're going to have the option to go Gnome Classic. Because at this point in time, we came to this from X, and the system has to, I don't know if it has to full reboot or if it has to just log out and log back in. So let's go ahead and give this a test right here. So let's see if this still says we are on X or not. What I found is turning on that Wayland on a fresh reboot on the system, I can choose where I'm booting into, whether I'm choosing X or choosing Wayland. So by default, that is turned off. You'll see that's still X. But what we're going to do here, let's go ahead and reboot the whole system. Now, having rebooted the whole system, I now have the option to go with the Gnome Classic, or Gnome on X. So this Gnome is now going to be the Wayland version. So it is a little bit complicated to get into Wayland if you want to, but the implementation to enable full Wayland support by a toggle switch, and then you can choose X or Wayland on your initial boot up, your initial login, that actually is, it's neat in that it appears as though it probably removes all of the Wayland functions from it entirely unless you toggle that button over. So now you'll see that your windowing system is Wayland. Other things to consideration, we spent way too long on Windows systems. Oh well. Other things of consideration, Manjaro always has really good theming. Of course, this being GNOME is not a lot, it's not a major, option to do theming on this. But if you pull any other desktop option available inside of GNOME, then you're going to have really nice theming, although they did do some simple things that worked out pretty well. As we did say in the introduction, the GNOME is not the latest version. This is one of the things that Manjaro does, is it doesn't just roll out packages as soon as they're available. GNOME 45 launched in September 2023. This version of Manjaro, I believe, was late October, if I'm remembering correctly. So almost a whole month has passed. They're still running Gnome on 44.5. So you'll notice that some of the new functions of this are not present, and that might hurt it in the long run. But overall, they have done a really, really good implementation that actually makes Gnome kind of fun. But let's go ahead and walk through some of the unique features that Manjaro, particularly Manjaro Gnome, always has. First is, this generally applies to every Manjaro version, is that every one of them is just beautiful. They put a lot into making sure everything looks nice and generally works nice. Of course, we did say in the intro there have been a few issues with Manjaro over the years. So that notwithstanding, we can see some of the other things going on. All right, so one thing that we noticed right out of the box here. So first, Manjaro is the organization that put together Pamuk for one of the best Arch package managers to interface with Pac-Man. And in this, of course, we have a nice GUI interface where we can see what's here. We can look specifically at the installed, and then we can see what is available for updates. There are a few issues in that if I don't want to update everything, but I want to install a simple package, it's very hard to have Pamuk not update everything while it installs a package, even if you come through and disable these checkboxes or not disable the checkboxes. It's a little annoying. But that being said, one of the things they've always done really well is managing their software and their settings, particularly under the third party. One of the things I noticed right out of the box is that this used to have Snap enabled by default, and they have apparently taken that out. Now, that forced you to install Snapd on your system anytime you were running Pamuk, and it would appear that that dependency is now gone. Now, AUR and Flatpak are both available, but disabled by default. You can toggle these guys on, and then when you toggle these guys on, you can choose some other settings and options there as well. We do have our advanced options. We can check for available disk space. We can remove unrequired dependencies. Do not check for updates when installing. That might be what I need to turn off on my other system. And you have the option to enable downgrade, and then you can ignore certain packages. And then over on our more general, we can check for updates, update frequency, automatically download updates, upgrade system at shutdown. Hey, if you like Windows 10, you'd probably love that feature. Yeah. You can hide the system tray icon when there is no update. And notice, ooh, we have a system tray icon. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? How many parallel downloads? And then there's official repositories, and you can go ahead and choose where you want these guys to be. And then we can refresh the mirrors as well. So there are a lot of good options inside of Pamuk. And overall, I really like the implementation of this particular piece of software. But that's not the only place you have software. You also have inside of the Manjaro Hello, you have this applications bar. This is going to give you easy install and removal of the most common packages in each one of these individual sections here. So we have our free office, we have LibreOffice, then the Fresh and the Still. If you're unaware of these, the Fresh is the absolute latest package. The Still is quote unquote like an LTS. We have an MS Office Online only office. And then there's some ebook supports, text editors, just other things. So the most common software is available for download over there. So that's actually really nice. And this brings us to one of the best options inside of this instance, why I say that they have done Manjaro right. Gnome specifically. So over here we have a few different options, kind of reminiscent as the theme switcher inside of Zorin OS. We have this option here. You'll see the Manjaro theming is your basic Gnome, but we have our dash to dock down here. We also have a more traditional layout, and we might need to hit reload the desktop to apply. This one here is going to give you more like a system tray-like look to it. So this is going to look pretty good. Note we have our desktop icons. So that's pretty nice. Taking a page from Cosmic, we have a tiling option. So you have the ability to create the tiling manager here as well. So there's a nice option for that. So let's see. Oh, there it is. So you'll see that we have a nice tiling option there as well. And then we can also do your default Gnome implementation as well. Of course, this is just going to get us your basic Gnome layout. And we'll just go back to the Manjaro option as well. So this is actually the one we're going back to the Manjaro option. I always need to hit the reload desktop to get that guy working correctly, getting back to that one. So let's see here. And then now we're back to our Manjaro. Now under the settings, this has some really nice options here. Obviously, we've already looked at this Wayland session button. We have a system tray button, which if this is the system tray icons, I'm not sure what that button is doing. But we also have the ability to enable desktop icons over here. And there is a Firefox Gnome theme as well. So here we have Gnome with desktop icons. You'll see, of course, we got a notification. We have Update Manager is working correctly. So all of these functions here are working really well. And this is really what makes Manjaro so good, is they've just thought of a lot of these little things that give the user their various options inside. And so let's go ahead and finish up here by looking at other Manjaro builds and options. So Manjaro itself supports x86 and ARM processors. And each one of these guys here, you have the option to choose your various desktop environments and things like that. And I guess get ads on their site. All right. So now, if I think this website changed again since when I downloaded this. I don't know. They changed their website way too much. So if it's different by the time you look at it, next week or something, it should all be here. It's just different themes. Officially, they have a Plasma Desktop, XFCE, and Gnome. On community builds, they have Budgie, Cinnamon, i3, Docker, Mate, and the Sway window manager. So those are options. But if you want to go back to your ARM, you can go ahead and click your downloads again, click the ARM option. And then over here under your just generic, we have our Gnome, Plasma, Mate, XFCE, Sway, and a minimal. But then under this, you can choose what is your ARM type processor. So here's your Orange Pis, here's your Pinebook Pro, Pine Phone. Here's your Quartz 64. Here's your Raspberry Pis. Here's your Rocks. So you have a lot of different support. And this is one of the reasons I ran Manjaro in production, is because I was using an ARM system in a low power environment. And I really wanted to see what type of, who did it best. So I experimented with a few different things. And that is what led me to Manjaro. So with that, let's go ahead and wrap up on my bonus content, my experience using Manjaro in production on a Raspberry Pi. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. Now our bonus content, my experience. Now, of course, I did build that video on Manjaro on the Raspberry Pi, and that was about, like I said, about 3 or 4 years ago. That video will be down below so you can have a look at that yourself. I think that was, 2020, early 2020, I think. So whatever that would be. Now, this is on a Raspberry Pi 4B with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and I have been using that in production as a web development computer. And over that time, it has served me very well. Now, because it is a Raspberry Pi that uses either an SD card or a USB flash drive, what I have done is every year since I've run it, is I have refreshed the card. I've purchased a new card. I've copied the installation onto the new card so that we never ran into a case where the card simply stopped working, because that would be really bad in a production environment. So in that 4 years, it has been a mostly positive experience. Obviously, I'm not going to do video production over there. I can still do some minor graphics and things like that, and the system works really well. Why did I do that? Well, because my entire studio is inside of a van. I'm in a mobile situation, and my entire YouTube channel gets run off of LiFePO batteries, lithium iron phosphate batteries. And because of that, I need to pay attention to the power consumptions. So here, I'm recording and doing this video here on a big streaming PC. It sucks power out of these batteries, like, it's sucking up a milkshake with a huge straw. But there's times you want to cut your power resources back. And so I have different tiered computers for different power levels. What is web design fundamentally, but manipulating text files and uploading them to servers? Something I can easily do on a Raspberry Pi, notwithstanding some of the modern REST JSP and other crazy JavaScript-based sites that don't work as well in the web browser. But overall, the system has worked pretty well, not quite as snappy as some of the laptops I have around here or some of the other systems, but it does do its job while keeping the power resources low, and it has served me very well for 4 years. The other comment I will mention here, and this is more applicable to the Raspberry Pi than anything else, but it's relevant in my build. I have found that even though you can run a modern Raspberry Pi to boot off of a USB drive, in theory, you'd think that works better. I've always found way better performance running the Raspberry Pi off of an SD card, not a USB drive. I have no idea why that is. I've done USB 3.1 drives. They are otherwise very fast. They just don't seem to work as well for whatever reason. Now, that being said, overall, the Manjaro system has been very well. There is, however, very, very recently an issue that I'm not sure if it deals with the Raspberry Pi, with Manjaro Global, or the major updates that they just did to Plasma. I am leaning towards it being updates they just did to Plasma, because there was a lot of shifting over. There were some packages I had to manually remove before running the updates. There were a bunch of things and a bunch of shifts over into KDE. And since that has happened, I updated that 1 week ago. And since then, twice in 1 week, I had a catastrophic system failure where my mouse seems to get stuck inside this little block and you can't get out of it. And I tried every possible command or thing I could try. The only option is to hit that power button and then turn the thing back on. That has happened twice since I've updated the system in the past week. I have had zero issues otherwise. Major issues, we'll say. There's been a few other things, evolution, other GTK applications. The mouse pointer location seems to not be correct. It's like 20 or 30 pixels underneath where it should be. That might be related to the fact that they had a major change on the Raspberry Pi versions of Manjaro, that you had to manually change the text configuration file in order to get your mouse back working. There were a few of those little fun things. Again, I don't know if that's related to the Pi or Manjaro or whatever else. This is an ARM-based situation. Now, that said, you might go, oh, that's a lot of craziness. Why would I possibly want to do that? Well, the reason is when I built this a number of years ago, I tried Debian, I tried Manjaro. I don't know if I tried Ubuntu or not because, but that being said, Manjaro is the distribution that worked absolute best. Audio worked, video worked, the desktop worked. I had no major fundamental problems outside of maybe running Raspberry Pi OS, but that just seemed a little lame to me. I don't know. Maybe is that just me? Maybe I should just be like, hey, Raspberry Pi OS, it's optimized. It should probably be the best thing. It's probably the thing I should be using, but for some reason I'm not. Anyway, but that has been my experience. Overall, it has been a very positive experience. However, with the latest update, which I think is more related to Plasma than anything else, there's a few instability items that I'm starting to examine if I want to switch over. And I just saw that the ARM BN just dropped, and that might be a good one to try out. So who knows? Stay tuned in the future. Maybe we will do an updated video on that. But my experience with Manjaro has been excellent. Well, that'll bring us to the end of the video. Thanks for sticking around this long. If you have gotten something out of this, please like this video, share the video far and wide, leave me a comment down below, and make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. And if you do like receiving notifications, hit that notification bell. If not, hey, I don't have my notification bells hit because I don't want to be notified. I just check your channel every day to see if there's an update. You can do the same as well. With that, thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM, or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.